All right, let's jump right in with a pretty wild idea. What if a sacred text, something you think of as a book of stories, what if it's actually the source code for reality? I mean, the literal operating system for the cosmos. That's the framework we're exploring today, looking at the Quran in a way you've probably never considered before.
So, where do we start? Well, it really begins with this fundamental human drive, right? This need to find structure in the universe. Forever, we've looked up at the sky, or at a leaf, or even just looked in the mirror, searching for some kind of pattern, some deliberate design, instead of just random chaos.
And that search for order, it led us to some incredible ideas, like sacred geometry. You've probably seen images like the flower of life. The core idea is just beautiful, really. It suggests that everything, and I mean everything, from a tiny atom to a sprawling galaxy, is built from the same set of basic, repeating geometric patterns.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting. What if all those beautiful, intricate patterns are only half the story? What if that's just the map, the blueprint, and the machine, the actual code that runs everything? What if that's written down somewhere else entirely?
Well, the framework we're diving into says yes, exactly. It argues that there's this whole other system running in parallel to what we see. And this system isn't about static shapes or pretty pictures. No, it's about dynamic processes. It's about operations.
And this is where the Quran comes in, but viewed through a totally different lens. Forget thinking of it as just a book of stories to be memorized. This framework sees it as a dynamic system, a set of instructions for navigating, for traversing the actual states of reality.
So at the heart of this whole thing is its engine, and it has a name, the 237 Triadic Lattice. I know, sounds complicated, but just think of it like a computer's processing core. It's built on 3 basic commands or operators that always, and I mean always, produce 7 specific, structured results. It's a closed, consistent system.
So how does this engine actually run? Well, it's not random at all. It follows a super strict 3-step process every single time. Step 1, injection. A new condition is introduced. Step 2, curvature. That condition gets tested, bent, or amplified. It's put under pressure. And finally, step 3, convergence. The process ends, and the outcome is sealed, locked in.
And here's where we circle back to sacred geometry, because there's an incredible parallel here. Think about it. To draw any shape, you need a starting point, right? An axis. Then you need to distort it or curve it somehow. And finally, you need to close the shape, give it a boundary. Well, it's the exact same logic here. Injection is the axis, curvature is the distortion, and convergence is the closure. The rules are just as precise.
And what about that number 7? It pops up everywhere in the text, but in this model, it's not some vague mystical number. Nope, it represents quantization. That's a fancy word, but the idea is simple. It means the system doesn't produce random results. It always resolves into a set number of discrete, structured outcomes. It's kind of like hitting a guitar string. It doesn't just make random noise. It produces specific harmonic notes. 7 heavens, 7 gates. These aren't just symbols, they're distinct states.
Okay, this is all pretty abstract. I get it. An engine with operators. So how does it actually apply to the stories and people we know from the Quran? Let's take a look at how this framework suggests these programs actually run in practice.
Let's take the origin triad, which you might know as the story of Adam. In this system, it's not just a story. It's the setting of an initial condition. First, the injection. Responsibility is introduced into the system. Then, the curvature. This new condition is tested through polarity and differentiation, the wife, the tree. And finally, the convergence. Shayṭān's refusal isn't just an act of evil, it's a test that forces a choice, sealing the outcome. And what's the outcome? A quantized descent into 7 specific states.
Okay, let's look at another one, the purification triad, which you'd recognize from the story of Ibrāhīm. The injection here is a promise of continuity. The curvature is that moment of orientation, that turn toward absolute truth. And the convergence, it's that famous act of submission. But it's not seen as a loss or sacrifice. In this framework, it's a calibration, a fine-tuning that makes the whole system more stable and coherent.
But what about when things go wrong? Well, the system accounts for that too. It has a process for entropy or system failure, and it's not defined as some kind of punishment. It's seen as pure information failure. It starts with an injection of noise. Then comes the curvature. That noise gets amplified, turned into a competing system. Think of Farah. The convergence happens when the original signal, the truth, is completely killed off. At that point, information stops flowing and the system just collapses, irreversibly.
So we've walked through this pretty complex model. What's the big takeaway here? What does this new perspective really tell us about that relationship between the map and the machine, the structure and the process?
You know, it really boils down to that central idea we started with. There is a huge functional difference between the map, the static blueprint of what exists, and the machine, the dynamic engine that's actually running the show, describing what happens.
So what you end up with are two different kinds of completeness. On one hand, you've got something like sacred geometry. The 12 Qur'anic grid is an example, and that represents spatial completeness. It's the stable container, the field. Then you have the 237 lattice, and that's operational completeness. It's the full set of programs that can run inside that container. It's literally the hardware and the software.
And this all leads to the final, really mind-bending idea from this framework. The Quran isn't a book written about light or about reality. It's written in light. The suggestion is that the code isn't just describing the universe. The code is the universe. The text isn't a commentary on reality. It's part of its very fabric.